going to get started. So I'm excited to introduce our speaker today, Ruth Arnold. We'll be giving the talk Confessions of a Seahorse Biologist, diving into an exhilarating field season across Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. Ruth holds a master's in biology from the University of Oxford and is this year's Oxford-Canada Rhodes Scholar. Her research at UBC combines interviews on fisheries and trade with underwater field studies to better understand seahorse biology and ecology. Ruth has hands-on experience in coral reef restoration with blue corner marine conservation and contributed to developing research protocols for model coral species at Cambridge University. Passionate about teaching science, she has worked with NGOs on various conservation challenges worldwide, particularly in Peru and Ecuador. Ruth is especially interested in community-based conservation strategies for preserving marine ecosystems. Now, before we begin our talk, we'd like to acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam people. And one more thing to note is that just a reminder from last time that for privacy reasons, if you do ask any questions during the middle of the talk, just know that this is being recorded, and so by asking or answering questions, you agree to be included in the recording. Otherwise, if you don't feel comfortable with that, then please leave your questions until the end. And with that, let's hear it for Ruth.
Okay, well, hello and welcome everyone. I'm really excited to be offering a little bit of an update about what I've been doing over the last almost 6 months away from this wonderful place. So without further ado, I shall begin. Now, I thought I'd have a bit of fun with this. So we are actually going to be having some very real confessions from my trip, and hopefully we'll learn some things together along the way. So thank you, Anthony, for the wonderful intro. Starting with confession number 1. And that is that seahorse biology is way cooler and weirder than people think. Now, if you were at my talk last year, you'll have a flavour of this, and I'm afraid we'll have a very brief recap of some of the weird, cool seahorse biology for those who don't already know. Now, to really get to grips with what I was doing in Mexico and getting stuck into the fieldwork, we really need to understand a bit more about seahorses first. So, enjoy some of the weird bio that's to come. So, seahorses, pipefish, and sea dragons all belong to the family Cygnathidae, which are a group of fishes known for their elongated bodies, which you can see in the pictures here, their tubular snouts, which you can also see, and their unique reproductive system. Now, does anyone in the room know what is unique about the seahorse reproductive system? Go for it.
Don't the men bear the children?
It is indeed the males bear the young. And you're going to see, I mean, it wouldn't be a Ruth presentation if we didn't have a male giving birth. So, so Nathan, you're... just kidding, we'll come on to that. This seahorse picture I've popped in the middle is just an example of one species that kind of combines all of those features from the kind of sea dragons, pipefishes, and the seahorses, all those characteristics. It's kind of neat. So 46 species of seahorses have been identified, and they have an incredible variety of colours, patterns and sizes, as you can see pictured here. And their sizes range from little more than 1 centimetre, this is like a grain of rice, all the way up to 35 centimetres. So we're talking sort of this big. I actually found one this summer, this big. So they do exist, it's not fantasy. And they're sort of masters of camouflage too. So this makes them really hard to spot. More on that later. Just for fun, I have drawn together a few similarities of seahorses with other wonderful organisms from around the world, both terrestrial and non-terrestrial. So, of course, we have our lovely horse. We have our lovely monkey, but from the perspective of this prehensile tail that can wrap around things. Now, seahorses have this tail that they wrap around what we call a holdfast, which is anything in their environment they can grab onto, and that is because, big secret, they're terrible, terrible swimmers. They're good at other things. They also have, well, the males have, this lovely brood pouch, similarity with our kangaroos, for example. And then, of course, the camouflage, our chameleons. So you can see they are these wonderfully adapted organisms borrowing from a range of different evolutionary strategies, which I think is truly wonderful. This is a video. Now, I mentioned that seahorses have many skills, one of which is being ambush predators. So this is what they look like when they're hunting. Now, seahorses don't have teeth and they don't have a stomach. So they basically need to be constantly eating, and they suck their prey with their tubular snouts. And they're considered in the animal kingdom to be quite voracious predators, would you believe? Small but mighty, we call them. And they eat these things, small shrimps, crustaceans, such like, pictured. They also have this incredible bony armour, which is meant to deter predators, because they're not so nice to eat. I also think they make excellent tattoo designs. I don't know if anyone else concurs. They also don't have scales, so pretty fun. Okay. Although most of their predators tend to be occasional, some of them have been identified, like the mahi-mahi on the left, and then the octopus here on the right. And actually, when I was working in the peninsula, I spoke to many fishermen that described pulling up octopuses, because they would be hunting them for consumption, and literally the octopus would be holding seahorses in their arms, or be midway through eating them, as they pulled them onto the boat. So, sad for the seahorses, but really interesting for me as a biologist to hear that it's happening. Okay, the life cycle. Now, the life cycle is very interesting because it's, as we mentioned, the male that carries the eggs in its brood pouch until they hatch. So seahorses usually live 4 to 5 years, depending on the species. But interestingly enough, males can get pregnant every few months. So gestation's only 2 to 3 weeks, and then it's pretty quick before they can go through and have more babies. And they take part in this amazing little dance. You can see in the top left, the male and the female actually dance around each other, get to know each other for a few days, and then once they're comfortable enough, will meet in the middle, and then the female will transfer the eggs to the male's brood pouch where they'll then be fertilized. So it's kind of this incredible feat of nature, very beautiful. And as I promised, it wouldn't be a presentation given by me if we didn't watch Seahorse giving birth. So this would normally have a David Attenborough voice. And I'm not very good at the David Attenborough voice, but he's like, and here we have a male seahorse ready to give birth. And in the video, contractions are about to begin. And then he says something about how they're one of the only species in the animal kingdom that do this. And you will start to see about now lots of little seahorses coming out of the brood pouch. And it is bizarre. Slightly better quality video than than the video I showed last year. So enjoy.
So cute.
So I guess a double confession is it is kind of weird, but it is also super cool. So there you go. Something some of you may have never seen in your lives.
It's just that easy.
So you're probably wondering, why am I telling you all this weird stuff about seahorse biology? And, cool, whatever, seahorses. Well, it sort of leads on to my second confession, which is that I don't really care about seahorses half as much as I care about what they actually do to protect our oceans, or the power they hold to protect our oceans. And so this brings me brings us a bit closer to what I was doing this summer. So seahorses live in coastal areas in these sorts of types of habitats pictured. And these, as some of you may already know, are some of the most vulnerable habitats in the world, subjected to many threats. Can I have some suggestions? What kind of threats do you think these ecosystems are facing right now? You can just shout them out.
Pollution.
Pollution, yes. Anything else? Climate change, absolutely.
Water temperature rise.
Yeah, also linked to climate change, very valid.
Biodiversity losses.
Biodiversity loss, yeah. Habitat loss, massive one. So yeah, this is just a picture of like some habitat degradation. The impact of boats on seagrass beds, one of the primary habitats for seahorses, amongst other factors. You can already see sort of pollution at play, urbanisation at play here. This is a seahorse trapped in marine litter. Things like abandoned fishing traps are bad, not only for seahorses, but also many other organisms. Human consumption's a big one. People like seahorses because they look pretty, and also they're used in traditional Chinese medicines. Here are some examples of some souvenirs where real seahorses feature, which is obviously rather sad. Be nice if we could avoid that. But the biggest threat that they face is bottom trawling, and this is a video of how bottom trawling works for those who don't know, but it's basically a giant net that goes to the sea floor. And we're talking like sometimes hundreds of meters. So, and it's just dragging across the sea floor and basically ravages everything in its path. So not only does it impact seahorse populations, but will also basically destroy everything else in its way, including habitats. So sponges, corals, seagrasses, whatever. This is an animation, but if you've seen David Attenborough's new film Oceans, they actually have real live footage of cameras in real trawl nets, and I really encourage you to find and watch them because they're really powerful. So it's one of the big threats. And here's an example of a seahorse in a massive collection of bycatch from one of these trawlers. And in case some of you didn't know, it has been the case for bottom trawling for a long time that only 25% of what is caught is kept and then 75% is thrown away. That's changing now, and there's now something called extermination bottom trawling where they just keep everything now. But either way, it's a really destructive form of fishing. And my department is working to try and figure out ways that we can work with fishermen, fish people, to find more sustainable ways of fishing. I mentioned seahorses are used in traditional Chinese medicines, and there's an estimate of 70 million seahorses that are caught each year to feed this demand, and most of this comes from illegal and unregulated fisheries. So that's also a problem. Seahorses aren't the only species affected by this, but the fact that it is illegal is a huge issue. So what can we do about it as biologists or as conservationists who want to work with communities? And one method is to use something called a marine protected area. They're not solvables, but they're approaches that we can use to try and put some protections in place for areas, and that's one thing my department does, is to try to work with communities to figure out, okay, could we put marine protected areas here to limit fishing? So for example, there's like no use zones where you can't do anything, no tourism, no fishing, or there's like buffer zones where there's some fishing activities, maybe artisanal, whatever. So just to give you a flavour of what we can do to combat these problems, as well as putting things in place to limit trades, etc. And so just to give you a flavour of what Project Seahorse has done just so far through the power of seahorses, they've established marine protected areas, they've completed assessments. Does everyone know or familiar with IUCN? For those who are not, they're just the organisation responsible for keeping tabs on whether species are vulnerable, decreasing, and it's just a really useful metric for us to be able to understand where to put conservation priorities, management priorities. We've made lots of alliances with subsistence fishers, fostered new legislation around trade, with dozens of new countries, driven global export regulations too, and then inspired worldwide community science through things like iNaturalist, where people can register what they're seeing in their environment, and iSeahorse, which is an offshoot of that. So, in summary, saving seahorses, in a way, saving the seas, because if we can foster an excitement and an investment in seahorses and their habitats, we then are in turn also fostering and investing in these ecosystems where many other species live and will continue to, hopefully. Confession number 3, which is getting into the sticky stuff. Finding seahorses is hard, really hard. This is a previous researcher from my lab who is getting stuck in there with the seagrasses. And our work, it really is to try and save seahorses, but we first need to study them and learn more about their biology and ecology and the threats they face. And that's exactly what I was doing. Before we continue, I think it's useful for you to all have a practice at how difficult it really is to see seahorses. So, can anyone suggest where the seahorse is in this picture for me? In the middle? Which part in the middle?
Like his tail is curled?
Yes, that's good. So this is the sort of scene, it's zoomed in of course, but you'd have a scene like this where you'd be looking for features that might identify, and often with seahorses, at least from my perspective, it's the tails that really give it away. But you can see similar colours, similar shapes, similar textures, and when you're trying to comb through kind of hundreds of metres of the same, very hard. Okay, you did pretty well. Challenge number 2 is how many seahorses are in this picture? Yeah, have a go. I'm going to give you a few seconds and then you can shout out.
The trick is none there.
Okay, any ideas? Numbers?
1.
Someone says 3? You see 3?
3.
You see 3? Oh, 4. Okay, let's see. Yeah, so we have one here. We have another one here. We have another, what looks like 1 or even 2, potentially, there. Another one there, kind of hard to spot. And then allegedly another one here, but I really struggled to see this one. So yes, finding seahorses is hard. Now, please hold that in your minds when we get onto the results of my field study this summer. Okay, confession number 4. Until now, we didn't know much about the state of seahorse populations or the threats they face in the Yucatan Peninsula. So that's why I headed out there. So we were actually invited by the local communities. We had a number of organisations and the local university, the Autonomous University of Mexico, UNAM, invite us to come as experts to come in and do these assessments and work with local fish people and divers, which is awesome to be invited in that way. And we knew that there were seahorses here. These red squares are from iNaturalist, where community members, divers have just uploaded pictures of seahorses, but no one's done a formal study yet. So they were like, please come and do it. So I was really excited to be invited. And so yes, I was out there conducting a baseline population assessment for the 3 seahorse species of the Yucatan Peninsula, Mexico. And also sort of curious to see if maybe there were others. Spoiler alert, I didn't find other species. But I did find one of each, at least one of each. Here's an example of one of the seahorses, the Hippocampus erectus, which is the line seahorse that actually Nuno Simoes, who's one of my co-supervisors on the project, found. But this research is important because we know for example, one of the species, Erectus, is vulnerable and decreasing according to IUCN. And if we can actually show that in studies or by conducting interviews, then we can start to implement management interventions alongside communities to try and help them. We're lacking data for all of the seahorse species, like full stop. And then, of course, as I mentioned, we're interested in these population assessments of seahorses and critically understanding the regional risks they face, which is required for these organisations that look at regulating illegal trade or national plans of action, which is what NPOA means. And so, my objective. Okay, for those of you who haven't fallen asleep yet, the objectives then, therefore, of the study to try and achieve a whole load of the aims that we set out was to gather information on the likely location and known threats to the 3 target seahorse species, focus the fieldwork to potential sites, and then conduct in-water analyses of species populations and environmental variables. And doing all of this, co-created with colleagues from the UNAM and marine technical schools across the Yucatan Peninsula. Because, as I'm sure you can imagine, when it comes to things like conservation or management initiatives, we don't want to be doing any of this stuff without the direct support, local knowledge, and expertise of local people. And again, I wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't a direct invitation to. So how do we do this? And you're going to see some fun pictures of this as we dive in. Interviews with fishers, local divers, and academics all over the Yucatan Peninsula. Then, using these interviews and other information we've got from our naturalists to sort of get a model idea of where we might actually find seahorses. And then conduct the underwater visual survey. So this is taking photos of seahorses, logging their GPS locations, and gathering environmental variables. And this is a picture of the sort of methodology we use. We basically pick up a seahorse, measure it, and then put it back in its location. I have a video of me doing this coming up. So, brief little summary of my interview results. Now, I, with my assistant, conducted 350 interviews with fisher people, divers, government officials, and academics in 25 localities across the peninsula over a 2-month period. So it was rather busy. I loved this. This middle picture was like one of the few female fishermen that we were able to interview, so I was really excited about that. It is quite a male-dominated field in this particular vicinity. And the interviews ranged from 5 minutes up to 3 hours, so it was super variable. And my first time doing true journalistic, social science-based biological investigation. Very valuable, I think. And we discovered some important patterns amongst fisher people and divers around fishing practices and around seahorses. So, we discovered about forms of fishing, like the traps, lines, harpoons, nets, and things like that. Notably, that 2-inch shrimp nets were impacting seahorse populations because they would get caught in them. We learned about the kind of seasonality of fishing and fishing effort, fishing hotspots and commercial centres, numbers and types of boats and crew sizes, the approximate number of boats, fishermen, cooperatives and storehouses in each locality. And here's an image summarising a whole range of different techniques that fishermen use across the Yucatan Peninsula. Now, what's cool about this research is that, yes, it's qualitative, but also we can start to draw some conclusions around, okay, well, if we know so many seahorses are caught by this method per day, per boat, per fisherman in this area, you can start to sort of market size up to, okay, well, this is probably the likely amount of seahorses that are getting pulled up every day. So it gives you quite a nice picture. This image on the far left is really interesting. Can you see those hoses that are in the base of the boat? Those are actually hoses that divers will breathe out of. They're compression divers, and it's an extremely dangerous form of diving. And I met loads of fishermen that talked about their family and friends like dying from this method of fishing, but they basically go down to plus 30-meter depths and will be there for hours, which for any of you who know anything about diving is really bad. And so one of the things I also was really happy to be able to do was to do some, to talk about decompression sickness and to share some potentially life-saving information about diving, because they don't get much education about diving safety. But yeah, that was very, very interesting. I'm happy to answer questions about this too, this side of the research too, should there be any. And yes, we found seahorses. We found that there are local artisanal traders, like in a particular area called Champoton. There was a lot. Fisher people reported around 2 to 5 seahorses, mostly live, which is important, that are trapped by nets per boat per day, depending on the mesh sizes used. And I also got approximations for rough number of fishermen per town, number of boats going out per day. I'm in the middle of processing that data, so it's not ready yet. But I'm excited to be able to share maybe some of those results down the line soon. Also, they would report that people, especially coming from Asia, would be paying fishermen extremely high prices for seahorses, despite catch and trade being prohibited. Now, this links back to this whole issue of illegal trade for traditional Chinese medicines. So that was interesting. We didn't know that this was going on to such an extent up until recently. Also, another interesting thing is that, yes, traditional Chinese medicines are a thing, but actually some locals even reported using ground-up seahorses in asthma treatments, but mostly amongst the older population. That was very interesting. And this image, it's my hand next to a whole collection of seahorses in a case, was actually shown to me by a captain of a fleet who was gifted seahorses. So it seems like seahorses are also a common currency for like gifting amongst the fishing community. So it'd be interesting to see if there are alternative ways of doing that sort of gifting that isn't going to damage populations. So after I completed these interviews, I could construct a map. Now, all the points in orange are places people reported seeing seahorses, or many people reported seeing seahorses, either through fishing or diving, whatever. Red is where all the places I end up going and actually diving. So you can see I was able to get quite a range. Now, you can probably see 2 dots. Those are the distant atolls I was talking about when I was advertising for this. Got the opportunity to go and survey seahorses or cygnathids in areas where no researchers usually go, which are these protected atolls. And so that's why people hadn't really mentioned seahorses being there, but they needed researchers to go out and just do a preliminary assessment. I think probably the highlight of this project was being able to distribute these, which was all over the peninsula. I could drop in these leaflets about iSeahorse. So local community members, fisher people, divers, schools, anyone working on the coastlines could actually contribute actively to the science going forwards. And that's one way we can really embed this work going forwards into the communities. And so I'm hoping when I get to write up our population assessment, we can actually use some of the data that the local communities have gathered across that time too and uploaded. So it's super exciting. Confession number 5. Fieldwork was one of the craziest and most rewarding experiences. Picture the typical day. We've gone out on a boat with some fishermen. We're in a small fishing boat. This is not glamorous. Sometimes fishing gear and old fish rotting away in the middle of the boat. But we're really reliant on these amazing fishing people because they know where seahorses are. They also have really good knowledge about local threats. So, okay, is this area being overfished? Or, is this particular seagrass degraded because of whatever reason? So this is how we'd begin. And this is one fisherman trying to guide us to where we could find seahorses. And you can see it's a little crazy. Nathan's actually sat like in the sun too. Got some heavy exposure to field work, which is kind of fun. And then you can see a little bit of the chaos in the boat, so all of our diving gear, getting ready. We had to follow quite strict protocols every day. And then we jump in. So it's a slightly blurry image, but it's Juan Carlos, who was an invaluable member of the team who would be responsible for our safety from the boat in case anything happened. Luckily it didn't. And this is what it looked like to measure seahorses underwater. So we'd find them. These are all my own pictures. We'd find them. We'd either measure them on a board, like you can see here, or we'd measure them. For example, this was a potentially pregnant male. So we were in a strictly protected marine area, so we measured it just whilst it was on the sponge. And then we also get a lot of our data from our dive computers while we're down there. And we're gathering things like species, sex, sexual phase, holdfast type, temperature, depth, lots of things that are really important for us, not only for seahorse populations, but also for understanding habitats and what's happening with them. This video is what it looks like I had to really gently try and take them off their little holdfast, so whether that's seagrass or whatever. It's a very gentle carry over. I was honestly trying to do this as carefully as I can. And I had to get special training for this, of course, as well, through the Animal Ethics Committee here at UBC. And then we would measure it. And I don't know if you noticed at the beginning of the video, the little marker. We'd always mark the area that we're taking the seahorse from so we can put the seahorse back in its exact location. And what was really great was that we had some work on Cozumel Island with some local representatives who actually followed up on some of the seahorses that we'd handled over the following weeks and reported that they didn't show signs of stress and that they stayed in the same place, and that was great. Although we do already know, it was nice to have that confirmation of the seahorse we were working with in Mexico. Visibility wasn't always great. That's me in the murky seagrass, 2 meters depth, trying to gather some data, and you can see how tiny some of the seahorses were. The middle one looks a little bit like a dragon. I love it. This is Hippocampus zosteri, which is the dwarf seahorse, so this species is small. And this one is almost the size of a grain of salt on the far right, so we're talking very tiny. I mentioned community was really important. At the end of a diving day, once we got out the water, if we were lucky, we get invited back to share a meal, with some of the people. So the gentleman sat just here is Ricardo, and he actually owned a number of boats and kindly let us go to the Refugio Pesquero, which is like a fishing protected area, where we found our first ever seahorse. And we had this amazing Mexican hospitality. We had a load of food and drink. I mean, there are beers in this picture. I just realised. I hope that's okay for an academic presentation. But yeah, it was so special, and I owe so much of the success of the project to these people across the peninsula who made it happen. Okay, so underwater study results. We surveyed 15 areas of interest and completed over 60 dives and snorkels. Although we only found 30 seahorses, we found all 3 species and signs of many more individuals, as well as distributing all of our ice seahorse leaflets. So we're hoping that by the end of the year, as I'm doing my deep analysis, we'll have enough data for a reasonable population study of sorts. And yeah, we established connections all over the peninsula for ongoing seahorse monitoring. And another thing we did, we were doing habitat assessments. So we were looking at the health of habitats combined with the interviews of local threats, not only to seahorses but to other organisms in the local area. We're able to build this picture and this narrative around where management intervention might be useful. And we also asked local communities what they wanted to see in their local areas, where they wanted to see improvement. And that will also all go in our write-ups and our discussions as we go forward with these potential interventions and ongoing discussions. Now, to round off, a very important confession. In our free time, we got up to some other fieldwork shenanigans. And we, of course, had a lot of fun chilling out too, because diving and interviews are hard work. And Nathan went on his first ever dive, and that is a huge achievement. So, well done. That was cool. Some of the best stars I've ever seen were out there. I mean, this is taken on Nathan's camera that has all sorts of funky settings. And this picture was taken in the pitch black, and you can see a turtle in the middle. It's a female nesting turtle, and we found ourselves on a really remote area of the east coast, where we had the absolute privilege of waking up to the sound of sand being thrown out of holes, and then we followed the noises to find these huge, beautiful turtles nesting. So that was an honour. We had a lot of fun as a team. As I mentioned, Juan Carlos, my primary dive buddy Meg, there's me, and Nathan as emotional support and tank bearer. So yeah, it was a fantastic time. And now I promised sharks. There are sharks. So we met a few. Well, I wouldn't say foes because this is a nurse shark, but this nurse shark was particularly problematic because it stalked us for an entire dive, and I don't know if you can get an idea of how close this shark is to the camera right now, but it was about, if I've got the camera here, it was about here, to the point where we actually had to end the dive because this was an overly curious shark and was actually trying to touch us. So in those situations, we don't want to be inflammatory towards the animals or anything, so we went up to our safety stop, which is normally 5 meters below the surface, and the shark actually pursued us to the safety stop, which is up like 12 meters, so we was like on the bottom and it went, whoop. So yeah, that was, I confess, that was quite a scary moment. Even though nurse shark they can't really hurt you too badly, they have been known to when they're aggressive, they can drag you around and stuff, so not fun. But we also met some friends. Now, I wish the audio worked on this because you can hear the amazing sound of lots of clicking dolphins. But one day we were diving and there was a pod of dolphins. There are more in the shadows in the background of this video. But they put on a really good... I mean, I don't want to say they put on a show because it makes it sound like, for us, they were just having fun for themselves. And we had the absolute privilege of being there to see them. So, look at them. I love them. They're so playful, actually. So it's very grateful to see some other nature on the way. So that's one of the perks of being a marine biologist, is you get access to some of these wonderful miracles of nature. And then, of course, our lovely sea turtles. And we were actually diving during part of their mating season. And so I remember one drift dive I was doing where there were just dozens of mating turtles everywhere. I also felt a bit awkward because I was like, I don't feel like I should be here being like, wow, this is so beautiful. Look at all these seahorses having sex. Anyway, but I mean, it's just incredible. And also, just as a success story for conservation, sea turtle populations in Mexico have bounced back massively because of conservation effort, and that gives us a lot of hope for the sorts of projects we're doing. And when you mentioned turtle conservation to fisher people or divers or academics, they could really get on board with that narrative. So when we then talked about seahorses, it wasn't that much of a difficult transference. So that was really cool. Okay, let's try and move forwards. Oh yeah. One day we didn't have to, but we were shown by local fishermen how to catch lobster, and we caught our dinner that day. So that was wild and hugely rewarding, as you can see. So that's a bit of a local knowledge passed on to us. I now know how to catch lobster. And we also got to do some recreational night diving. So Nathan took this photo from above, which is pretty cool, all the divers down in the water. And then this is Juan Carlos, actually, one of my assistants, down. Very magical, and lots of bioluminescence, which was stunning. And that brings us on to our final confession, which is this work would not have been possible. If it say would have been possible, it's kind of embarrassing, but it would not have been possible without the help of so many fishers, volunteers, assistants, scientists, divers, and community members, including Yachmel, who is the girl on the left. She was my interview and translation assistant, and for a long time it was just me and her rocking in the field. And I'm so grateful for everything she taught me. Juan Carlos, who I've mentioned, surface support and everything man. He was the one who calmed me down when we actually encountered pirates. That is a story that I'm happy to tell maybe afterwards, but luckily everything was fine. Nathan was there, General Assistant, Professional Tank Bearer, and other things, obviously. Meg, I couldn't have done it without Meg. She was my primary dive buddy, and she was in it through the poor visibility, terrible surge, 2-meter dives, down to the most incredible dives in distant atolls where we saw archways of corals and hundreds of fish, and it was just amazing. She also almost saved my life on a few occasions, so grateful for her. And Alex, who came out as a field assistant. He's originally from Mexico and wanted to come and contribute to the work. And of course, many, many, many more people. And when I say dozens, I mean dozens. People from the UNAM who helped with the project, every single local fisher person or captain who took us out on their boat generously, people who worked in government organisations that gave us permits. Just honestly, my acknowledgements list in the report is going to be probably longer than the thesis itself. And with that, I'd like to say thank you for listening, and I'll welcome any questions.